The first thing I noticed about her was her boots. Scuffed wrong. Not soldier scuffed, that grinding heel drag scuff of someone who'd walked 10,000 miles in worse shoes than these. The kind of scuff that told you the boots were new but the feet inside them were not. The second thing I noticed was that nobody was talking to her. Her name, according to the roster sergeant Kelly read at 0530 on a Tuesday that smelled like diesel and, coming rain, was Reyes. No first name on the roster, just Reyes. She stood third from the left in the lineup outside forward operating base Kestrel. And she was 5'4" on a generous morning, and the M4 slung across her back looked like it was trying to swallow her whole. Kowalski leaned over to me. "That's our new attach," he whispered. "Apparently. She looks like somebody's little sister." I didn't say anything. Kowalski was Kowalski, big jaw, bigger mouth, the kind of guy who called everything before he understood it, like naming something gave him power over it. 12 months in country with him had taught me to wait. Let him finish. Let reality correct him. Sergeant Kelly finished the roster. Nobody asked questions. We filed into the briefing hut, and Reyes walked in last, and she sat in the back corner where the light didn't quite reach, and I watched her for exactly 3 seconds before I stopped watching her. You learn not to invest too early. That's a thing the Army teaches you that it never says out loud. Her first week she didn't talk much. This was, I would later understand, a deliberate choice. At the time I read it the way everyone else did. Quiet because she was uncertain. Uncertain because she was green. We'd all been green once. We were patient in the way that soldiers are patient with green people, which is to say, not very. She ate alone or near alone. She ran PT at 0430 before the mandatory PT at 0600, which nobody mentioned because if you mentioned it you'd have to explain why you'd noticed. She cleaned her weapon twice when once was protocol. She never complained about the heat, which in Helmand Province in August was the kind of heat that sits on your chest like a physical presence, a living weight, something that breathes on you. 42 Celsius on a cool day. The flies were worse than the heat. She transferred from where? Kowalski said one night. We were playing cards in the East Barracks, 6 of us around a folding table that had one leg slightly shorter than the others so everything tilted imperceptibly to the right. You forgot about it until you put your coffee down and it slid. Records say 10th Mountain, said Torres, who was small and precise and read everything. Before that she's got a gap. What kind of gap? The kind that doesn't explain itself. Kowalski snorted. Career gaps in the military mean one of two things. You screwed up somewhere, or you, he paused. Reorganized. Nah. She screwed up somewhere. Probably got reassigned. Torres put down a card. Or option 3. Which is? Torres looked up. He had a face that didn't give anything away. Not amusement, not contempt, not the very specific expression of a man who knows more than he's saying. He'd had it since I met him and I'd never cracked it. Option 3, he said again. That was all. Kowalski waited. Torres didn't elaborate. The table tilted slightly right. My coffee didn't slide because I'd learned to compensate. The first time I actually spoke to Reyes was day 9. She was behind the motor pool, sitting on a crate, and she had her left boot off, and she was doing something to the insole with what looked like a piece of copper wire and her thumbnail. It was 2,100 hours and the sky above the mountains was the color of old bruises fading. You need a medical kit for that. I said, because I thought she might have a blister situation, which in the field becomes a tactical problem faster than most people expect. She looked up. She had dark eyes, the kind that were so dark the pupil and iris blurred together at distance, so you couldn't tell where looking became seeing. She looked at me for a second and a half, which in human terms is nothing but, in soldier terms is a reed. It's not a blister, she said. What is it? She held up the insole. There was a small flat receiver embedded in the foam, thin as a playing card, military spec, the kind of equipment that had a specific home and that home was not a boot insole. Monitoring device, she said. Someone put it there. I looked at it. Yours or not mine. She said it flat. She said it the way you say a thing that is simply a fact and requires no emotional seasoning. She put the boot back on. She pocketed the receiver. Don't mention it, she said. To who? She almost smiled. Or something moved near her mouth that could become a smile if the conditions were right. Anyone, she said. She stood up and walked back toward the barracks, and I stood there for a moment in the fading bruise light of the Helmand sky, and the distant mountains looked like they were watching, and I thought, option 3. The mission briefing came on day 12. Route clearance. Convoy support through the Sanjin corridor. Standard abnormal. Standard in objective. Abnormal in that the corridor had been hot for 6 weeks, 2 IED strikes in the last 8 days, no pattern anyone had successfully modelled. Our job was to get a logistics convoy from FOB Kestrel to COP Nighthawk, 14 kilometres that might as well have been 14 light years. Captain Mercer ran the briefing. He was from Georgia, Captain Mercer, and he had the unhurried delivery of a man who had made peace with most bad outcomes. He laid it out clean. Routes Alpha and Bravo both compromised. Route Charlie was theoretically clear. Theoretically. Any questions? Mercer said. Silence. The briefing hut had a single overhead bulb that flickered every 40 seconds with the regularity of a heartbeat. Reyes raised her hand. Kowalski, sitting 2 seats left of me, shifted his weight. Route Charlie's elevation change at grid 447 creates a dead angle for the lead vehicle's gunner, she said. Anything staged on the eastern ridge above that grid would have a clean shot at the cabin before the 50 could engage. Mercer looked at her. The bulb flickered. You've walked that route, he said. No, sir. Driven it? No, sir. Then, how are you? Topographic analysis. The grid data in the mission packet. She paused. The ridge angle is in the terrain data. It's a 4-degree variance, but it closes the gunner's arc at that specific approach. Mercer looked at her for 3 full seconds. Then, he looked at his map. Then, he looked back at her. Good catch, he said. Kowalski said nothing. Torres, beside me, said nothing either, but I felt him not saying it very loudly. We adjusted the convoy approach for grid 447. The mission ran 14 kilometers, 6 hours, 2 false positive triggers on the route clearance equipment, 1 IED found and marked and destroyed by end of day, buried at grid 447, eastern approach, exactly where the dead angle would have been. Nobody said anything about it on the way back. We ate dinner. We cleaned weapons. The flies were bad again. Kowalski sat next to me at chow and ate his rice and chicken and stared at the table. The boot scuff, he said finally. What? Her boots. They're scuffed wrong. Yeah. I thought it was because they were new. I know. He was quiet for a moment. The generators hummed outside. Someone's radio crackled. Distant traffic, nothing urgent. It's not because they're new, he said. No, I said. It's because she's been wearing different boots. For a long time. And these ones are the wrong shape for her feet. I looked at him. He had his jaw set in the way he said it when he'd been wrong about something significant and was doing the internal math of revision. What kind of mission wears different boots? He said. I didn't answer. He didn't need me to. The helicopter landed at 0315.
No announcement.
No radio traffic on the channels we monitored. 1 minute the LZ was empty and dark and smelling of dust and dried grass, and then there were rotors and the rotor wash knocked over Perez's coffee mug from the edge of the sandbag wall and it shattered and Perez said something in Spanish that required no translation. Black Hawk. No unit markings. 2 men got off. Civilian clothes on one. The other was in uniform. No rank visible at first. Collar turned, moving fast and low the way people move when they've done it in places where moving upright gets you killed. They went straight to Captain Mercer's quarters. I know this because I was on watch rotation. 4 in the morning, northeast corner of the perimeter, and I watched them cross the compound with a particular kind of purpose that isn't urgency. Urgency has panic buried underneath it, something leaking, but this was different. This was a thing that had already been decided and was now simply being executed. 15 minutes later, Sergeant Kelly's light came on. 12 minutes after that, Rhea's light came on. Then, it went off. At 0600 PT she was there. Same spot in the lineup. Same scuffed boots. Nothing on her face. Kowalski ran next to me on the track. We always ran together because we matched pace, which was the only thing we matched, and he said nothing for 3 kilometers and that itself was the loudest thing he'd said in weeks. At the 2-mile mark, you see the helo last night. I was on watch. Unmarked. Yeah. Went straight to Mercer. Yeah. Then, Reyes light. I said nothing. My boots hit the packed dirt in their rhythm. The mountains in the early morning were purple-grey, still cold, the sun not yet cresting. A few birds. Distant. I asked Torres, Kowalski said. What did he say? He said option 3. We ran. What the hell is option 3? Kowalski said. Mercer called a team leaders meeting at 0900. I was not a team leader. I was E5, 3 years in, second deployment, and my job was to be where I was needed and do what I was told with enough competence that nobody had to say my name in a briefing. This was, I had decided, the correct way to exist in the army. I heard about the meeting from Torres, who was a team leader and who told me about it in the specific way of someone who doesn't tell you something but tells you the shape of the hole where the thing would go. New attachment, Torres said. Temporary reassignment. Reyes. She's being moved to a joint element. Temporarily. What kind of joint element? Torres straightened his pen on the table. A very small adjustment. Barely worth making. The kind, he said, that doesn't appear on the FOB's operational log. I let that sit. Who were the men on the helicopter? I said. One was a liaison. He paused. The other was a colonel from Naval Special Warfare Command. The flies were loud. Navy, I said. At an Army FOB. At an Army FOB, Torres confirmed. He straightened the pen again. There was nowhere further for it to go, but he tried anyway. In civilian clothes. For Reyes. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. In the space where his answer would have gone, I built it myself, brick by brick, out of boot scuffs and monitoring devices and topographic instincts and a gap in service records and an almost smile in bad light behind the motor pool. She found me that afternoon. I was doing maintenance on my kit, not because it needed it, but because there is a particular kind of thinking that requires your hands to be busy. The desert wind had picked up and it was getting into everything, into the threading of bolts, into the fine dust that found its way between the bolt carrier and the lower receiver, into the corner of your eye. Garrison, she said. That was my name. Most people used it without the rank because the rank was unremarkable and the name was easier. I looked up. She crouched beside me. Not sitting, crouching, weight on the balls of her feet, ready to stand in less than a second. It was a resting position that wasn't resting. I'm going to be off base for a while, she said. I heard. Who told you? Nobody told me anything. I heard the shape of it. She looked at me with those bruised dark eyes and again I got the read, the second and a half assessment that was faster than it appeared. You're perceptive, she said. Not a compliment. A piece of information. Occasionally. She was quiet for a moment. The wind moved a thin sheet of dust across the ground between us. She watched it. If someone asks where I am, she said. You don't know. I don't know where you are, I said. That's true already. Keep it true. She stood. She was already turning when I said it. I don't entirely know why I said it, except that some things need to be named if only so you know you saw them. Black Viper, I said. She stopped. The wind moved. She didn't turn around. Her shoulders didn't shift. Her breathing didn't change, as far as I could tell from 3 feet away, which was not far but was enough. Where did you hear that? She said. Her voice was the same. Flat and factual. But there was something under it. Not fear, not anger. Something that had weight. I didn't hear it, I said. I guessed. That was a lie. A specific lie. I had heard it, half a word, late the previous night, carried on the wind through a badly sealed window in the briefing hut, 2 voices low and quick and then cut off. A name spoken like a call sign. Like something you didn't say where the wrong people could hear it. She was still not turned around. Guess less, she said. She left. She was gone 3 days. In 3 days, nothing changed at FOB Kestrel except everything felt like it was holding its breath. Mercer ran 2 patrols, both clean. The IED sweep found nothing. The flies were slightly better. Someone got a care package from home and shared the jerky, and for approximately 40 minutes the barrack smelled like peppered beef and almost civilization. Kowalski played cards and lost and blamed the table's tilt. Torres read a paperback he refused to show the cover of. I ran PT and cleaned my weapon and did my watch rotations and thought about things I had no clearance to think about. On the third night, around midnight, there was distant gunfire. Not our direction. Northeast, past the ridge line, further than our operational boundary, somewhere in the dark folds of the mountain where the maps got vague and the grid coordinates meant less. Not sustained. 2 short bursts, then silence, then one single report that echoed and echoed and echoed until it became indistinguishable from wind. Nobody scrambled. Mercer's light came on for 6 minutes and went off. The radio traffic that came through the monitored channels was all routine, which meant whatever was happening northeast of the ridge wasn't on our channels. Which told you something. She came back at 0430 on the 4th morning. I was on watch again. I'd traded rotations with Diaz, who had a blister situation that had become the tactical problem I'd predicted, and so I was there when the vehicle came through the north gate, a non-standard civilian pickup running without headlights, the engine noise cut to nearly nothing through some modification I didn't recognize. She got out. Alone. She was in different clothes, not civilian, not quite military, something in between that had no insignia and the particular kind of neutral coloring that wasn't camouflage but wasn't anything else either. She had dust on her from boot to collar, the deep red-brown dust of the far mountains, not the pale dust of the valley floor. She was carrying something in her left hand. A phone. An old one. Not military issue, not commercial. The kind of phone that required explanation. She walked past the guard station without checking in, which meant she'd been pre-cleared, which meant Mercer knew, which meant the 3 days had been coordinated from a level above what I could see. She walked past me. She stopped. Turned. In the flat dark before dawn, she looked at me for a long moment and I noticed, for the first time, in that specific light, that her left forearm had a new bandage on it. Not a big one. Clinical size, clean edges, the work of someone who knew what they were doing. A field dress that had been replaced at least once. "You're still awake," she said. "Still on watch." She looked at the mountains behind me. The far northeast, where the dark was. "It's done," she said. I didn't ask what it was. "Okay," I said. She nodded once. Walked on. I stood at the northeast corner of the perimeter and watched the sky begin its slow argument with the darkness, the first blue-gray light finding the mountain peaks like a question looking for an answer. The distant ranges were still. Whatever had moved up there in the night was still now. The flies weren't up yet. For 10 minutes it was almost quiet. At 0600, at PT lineup, she was in her spot. The scuffed boots. The regulation stance. Third from the left. Kowalski was next to me and he stared at her for 3 full seconds, openly, which he never did, and then he looked at the ground and then he looked at me. I shook my head slightly. He nodded. He understood. Some things you don't ask about. Not because you're not allowed to, but because the asking itself has a cost, and some costs you don't pay until you understand what you're buying. The Colonel came back on day 18. This time it was broad daylight, 1,400 hours, the helicopter fully visible as it came over the western ridge and set down on the LZ in a cloud of that pale valley dust. Same Black Hawk. Still no unit markings. He got out alone this time. Full uniform. And, this time the rank was visible. Bird on the collar. Navy 06. Captain in Navy terms. Colonel by cross-service courtesy. The chest was a summary of a career I couldn't read in full, a row of ribbons that meant things I didn't have the key to, and, among them, I had to look twice, a trident. Gold. Naval Special Warfare.
SEAL.
He was a SEAL colonel. At our FOB. In full uniform. In the afternoon. Which meant he wasn't hiding anymore. Mercer brought him to the team room. We were all there, not by coincidence, by summons. A runner had come around 30 minutes before and told each team leader to gather their people, which never happened, which meant this was something that required witnesses. The colonel stood at the front of the room. He was about 50, spare and angular, the kind of face that hadn't carried unnecessary weight since sometime in his 30s. He had calm eyes, not cold, but settled, the way still water is still. He didn't introduce himself by name. "You've been operating with an attached element for the past 18 days, he said. For operational security reasons, the nature of that element was not disclosed to you. That changes now. He looked at the room. The IED at grid 447. The one you found on day 12. Heads nodded. You found it because your route was adjusted based on topographic analysis in the mission brief. That analysis was correct. What your mission brief didn't include was why the IED was there. He paused. Not for effect. For accuracy, finding the exact words. There is a network operating in this corridor. We have been working to map it for 14 months. The cell that placed the device at 447 is part of a chain that runs from the valley floor to the northeast range. 6 nodes. 3 countries. He let that sit. Over the past 18 days, your attached element has been gathering confirmatory intelligence on 2 of those nodes. 2 nights ago, confirmatory became actionable. A joint element executed on that intelligence. He paused again. The operation was successful. Both nodes have been neutralized. The chain is compromised. The room was very quiet. Kowalski was to my left and I could feel him not moving with the kind of effort it takes to actively not move. Your attached element, the colonel said, will be leaving FOB Kestrel today to continue the operation against the remaining nodes. Before she does, I want you to understand what she's been doing in your midst, and why she's been doing it the way she's been doing it. He looked at the back corner of the room. Reyes was standing there. Same corner. Same bad light. Her call sign, for those of you who've been running the math, the colonel said, is Black Viper. She's been running intelligence operations in this theater for 6 years. 3 of those years were in cover so deep that her service record was intentionally degraded to support the legend. He didn't look away from the room. She is one of 3 female operators to have completed a modified special reconnaissance pipeline in this command's history. She holds 2 classified commendations and a citation that cannot be read in any unclassified setting. He let that land. She asked me not to do this, he added. I'm doing it anyway, because the people who watch your back deserve to know what kind of watching was being done for them. He looked at Reyes. He said. Reyes said nothing. She had her arms crossed and she was looking at the floor just in front of her left boot, the scuffed one, the one with the wrong wear pattern for its shape, and her expression was the expression of someone enduring something uncomfortable with the discipline not to show that it is uncomfortable. Then she looked up. She looked at the room. Slowly. Not performing, assessing. The way she'd assessed me that first night behind the motor pool, the second and a half read. Then she almost smiled. The same almost. The same condition required. Don't screw up the next convoy, she said. She left that afternoon. Same pickup. Same civilian military nothing clothes. The dust from the LZ hadn't settled from the colonel's helicopter before she was in the vehicle and the vehicle was moving and the north gate was closing behind her. Kowalski watched from the perimeter wall with his arms folded and his jaw doing the thing it did when he was filing something under permanent storage. Nobody said much. Dinner that night was quieter than usual, and it wasn't a bad quiet, not the quiet of bad news or the quiet of cold food or the particular loaded silence before something happens. It was the quiet of recalibration. Like a compass needle finding north after being near a magnet. Torres sat next to me. He ate his food. He didn't say anything for a long time. Then, 6 years, he said. Yeah. In cover. That whole time. Parts of it. He considered that. Rearranged it. That's a long time to be somebody you're not, he said. I thought about the boot insole, the copper wire and the thumbnail at 2,100 hours in the fading light. The way she'd said not mine, flat, factual, requiring nothing. I don't think she was being somebody she wasn't, I said. Torres looked at me. I think she was exactly who she was, I said. Just in a different shape. He thought about that for a while. Then, he picked up his fork and ate and didn't say anything else. But, somewhere in the quality of his silence was agreement. And, Torres's agreement was a thing you didn't get lightly. 3 days after she left, the convoy to COP Nighthawk ran again. Different cargo. Same route, Charlie, adjusted at 447, the EOD scar still faintly visible in the road surface where the packed earth had been disturbed and replaced. Our lead gunner swept the dead angle at that grid and found nothing. We found nothing on the entire route. 14 kilometers in 5 hours and change, clean all the way, and when we pulled into Nighthawk the logistics sergeant signed off and We turned around and came back and nothing happened. Kowalski, on the return leg, was quiet until kilometer 11. You think she's okay, he said. Not a question, exactly. Not quite. I think she's been okay and worse, I said. He nodded. His jaw unclenched slightly. Not all the way. The monitoring device she pulled from her boot, he said. Somebody put it there to track her. Inside the FOB. Yeah. Which means somebody here was. Don't finish that sentence out loud, I said. He stopped. We drove the last 3 kilometers in silence. The valley floor was flat and bare, and the late afternoon light was the specific copper color of Helmand in September, warm and slanted and merciless, and the mountains on both sides were purple going dark. I'd done enough deployments by then to know that some things you see in a place live there permanently. Not in you, in the place itself. The light, the dust, the specific shape of the shadows at a specific hour. You could leave and the place would keep them, faithful and indifferent. Whatever she'd done out there in the northeast arc, the mountains had it now. The official report, when it was filed, and I only know this because Torres had a contact in the J2 shop who'd had more than 2 drinks at a FOB-wide morale event 6 weeks later, said, intelligence-led disruption of 2 network nodes. Joint element operation, details classified. No Blue Force casualties. Operational details embargoed at JSOC level pending network deactivation. That was all. No name. No call sign. No mention of a woman with scuffed boots and borrowed equipment and a 6-year legend built out of degraded service records and silence. No mention of the bandage on the left forearm. No mention of the almost smile. I thought about her on and off in the weeks that followed, the way you think about things that shift your coordinates, not obsessively, but the way the mind returns to a recalibrated reference point to check its bearings. I thought about what it means to be somewhere for a reason nobody knows, and to do a job that doesn't get a name in any report that anyone in that place will ever read. I thought about what it costs to wear a legend so deep that your own service record lies about you. I thought about doing that for 6 years. For 3 of those years in operational cover, which meant what, exactly, meant that she woke up every morning as someone who didn't exist, who had no history the world could confirm, who ate the lie for breakfast and moved through the day as its living proof. And then, she sat in the back corner of a briefing and raised her hand and talked about topographic dead angles. Because the mission mattered more than the cover. Because 14 kilometers of road going wrong mattered more than the secrecy of the person who knew it would go wrong. Because some things you can't watch happen from cover if you have the capacity to stop them. I talked to Mercer about it once. Not directly. We didn't talk directly about things at that FOB, it wasn't the culture, but, obliquely, in the way 2 people who share a language of omission can have a full conversation without saying the thing at its center. We were at the fuel depot. Late. Post-mission, the last vehicle parked, the smell of exhaust hanging. He was doing the commander thing of checking small things that didn't need checking because the day hadn't ended properly and couldn't until he'd touched the perimeter of it. She compromised her own cover, I said. Grid 447. Raising her hand in the briefing. She didn't have to do that. Mercer kept checking his small thing. No, he said. Was that sanctioned? By the colonel. A pause. A long one, by Mercer's standards. She made a judgment call, he said. About what? He looked up from the thing he was checking. About what was worth more, he said. A clean cover. Or a clean route. He went back to checking. She chose the route, I said. She chose the route, he said. The generators hummed. The night was coming in from the east, cooling, the temperature dropping fast the way desert nights drop, a switch, not a gradient. Does the colonel know she compromised it? I asked. Mercer allowed himself, very briefly, a small expression that I had never seen on his face before and couldn't fully name. It was somewhere between exasperation and something softer. The expression of a man recounting a story in which someone was both insubordinate and completely right. He's the one who came back in full uniform, Mercer said. What do you think? I thought about it. I think he came back to square the debt, I said. Mercer said nothing. Which was what he said when you'd gotten something right. The monitoring device she'd pulled from her boot. It stayed in my mind. Somewhere in the FOB, in those first 12 days, someone had placed a tracker in the boot of a deep cover operative. Had known she was there. had known what she was, and had wanted to know where she went. I was E5. Not my clearance level. Not my problem to solve. Not a problem I had any tools to solve. But it sat there in the back of my mind the way small things sit when they have large implications. Quiet, patient, heavier than their size. I mentioned it to Torres a month later, when we were back at Bagram between taskings and the pace had slowed enough for thinking. The device in her boot, I said. She pocketed it. She didn't report it through channels. Torres was reading his cover-hidden paperback. He turned a page. No, he said. She kept it quiet. Yes. Which means she wanted whoever placed it to think it was still there. Still working. Torres turned another page. Still feeding them her location, I said. So she could control what location they were reading. He said nothing. She used it, I said. She fed them the wrong location data while she was operating in the Northeast. They tracked a ghost. I paused. That's why the operation worked. The network was watching for her and watching the wrong place. Torres closed the book. He looked at me. You know what option 3 is, he said. It wasn't a question. Option 3 is someone who didn't get reassigned, I said. Option 3 is someone who got here exactly the way they were supposed to get here. He reopened the book. Took you a while, he said. I never saw her again. That's the most military sentence I know. I never saw her again. You could fill a barracks wall with the people it applies to, not only the dead, but the transferred, the reassigned, the rotated out, the one swallowed by the machine into some other theater, some other fight, some other 14 kilometers of road that needed a name in a report that no one would read. Some of them left echoes. Small ones. A way of checking equipment, a habit of looking at the northeast corner of any room you enter, a tendency to read terrain data all the way to the edge of the packet before the briefing even starts. A 3-second assessment whenever someone new comes through a gate. The boot scuff that tells you what shoes a person was wearing before these ones. Kowalski rotated home 4 months after she left. He married his college girlfriend in March and sent the unit a photo of himself in dress blues and a look on his face that I can only describe as bewildered gratitude, the expression of a man who can't quite believe the room he's standing in. Torres extended his contract. He's still in, as far as I know. Somewhere. The shape of where I don't have access to. Mercer made major and got a desk assignment at Bragg that he did not complain about in any communication I received from him, which itself told you something about what the desk was actually for. Me. I did my time. Did it again. Came home in one piece with 2 functional legs and a complete set of fingers and a debt to the specific arrangement of variables that had kept me upright when the same variables had put other people down. I think about that debt. Not in the big dramatic way, not the way movies think about it, not the weeping veteran at the memorial, not the 1,000-yard stare. Smaller than that. More specific. A thing you carry in the way a pack fits your back after enough miles. You stop noticing you're carrying it, but the weight shapes how you walk. I've been asked, since coming home, what war is like. People mean well. They're curious in the genuine way, not the prurient way. They want to understand something that lives outside their experience. I don't blame them for asking. I don't know how to answer. What I know is this. War is grid 447. War is a boot insole with a tracker in it and a woman with dark eyes who pockets it and says don't mention it and means something more than the words. War is 14 kilometers that might as well be 14 light years, and the topographic dead angle that would have killed someone, and the one person in the room who saw it because she'd been seeing things like that for 6 years in the dark when nobody was watching. War is an almost smile in bad light. War is coming home to discover that the person who kept you safest is someone whose name doesn't appear in any report you'll ever read. War is option 3. I looked up the commendation criteria for special reconnaissance once. Not the classified commendations, the framework, the general parameters. What that pipeline asks of a person. What it takes and what it leaves. I stopped reading after 2 pages. Some debts you carry at the level of acknowledgement, not calculation. You know the weight. You don't name the number. What I know, she is somewhere. Doing something. In boots that fit someone else's feet. In a shape that isn't quite the one she was born in. Looking at the northeast corner of the room. The mountains kept what they kept. The mountains in Helmand keep everything. The heat, the dust, the specific copper light of September, the echoes of 2 short bursts and one single report folding into wind. I keep what I keep. A 3-second read. A wait on the walk. An understanding, earned slow and filed under permanent storage, that the most dangerous people in any room are often the ones in the corner you don't look at long enough to understand. And that some walls, the ones that catch you instead of stop you, are not walls at all. They thought she was joking. She wasn't joking. She was never joking. She was working. Written from the perspective of Staff Sergeant D. Garrison, 2nd Infantry Division, FOB Kestrel, Helmand Province. Dates and identifying operational details modified for security compliance.